These people can't see you, but they can hear you. So you can still pick your nose. But quiet.
Fart, fart, fart. I will fart. What if I do that? Thank you.
I'm glad I was recording for that.
That's my test. It's the fart test, they call it. There's a Bechdel test and there's a fart test.
It's fun to see the little avatars show up in single file.
Well, I'm glad we don't have video up yet, so nobody can see that I went into fight access while one tap and didn't quite make it.
Time to post on Twitter and such. get started. Hello, everyone. Video is frozen. Let's see. Michael, Alex, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I?
Cool. There you are. Okay, welcome everyone to our June update Q&A, where Michael and Alex attempt to answer your questions.
Attempt.
Do their best. All we're doing here is doing our best. How's the June update going for the team? How's everyone feeling? Any things you want to share before we get into Q&A?
Feeling pretty good. This is a smaller one to make more space for the July update, which will be our second major update for the game. So I think I've said before on these that we can do about a month's worth of work in a month, and so the June pretty happy with it, and seems like it's been well received and looking good so far.
Awesome. Alex, any words from you?
I mean, what Michael said. We got a lot of work ahead of us on many fronts, so try and do as much as we can each update, but sometimes you need to test a lot of stuff, so it takes time. Luckily, we're getting better and better at it each time.
Great. All right, let's get into questions. First question from Mage Farago. Are there plans to massively overhaul the amount of hollows in the game, or further rework/refine the system to lean into replayability?
Hollows in this, and then like the holobytes, the mods.
Yeah.
I assume.
That's what I assume. Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about it in the past. There's still a lot of work to do across all of the mods in the game, including holobytes. So, whether or not it's some massive rework or it just continues to fit better, / we get the full scope of them in there and continue to balance and et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot there to still dig into throughout the course of early access. So we'll keep expanding and adjusting and tuning as we need to.
Yep. Yeah, that's you'll see smaller updates here and there. Expect to see larger shifts there as we get closer to version 1.0 and we have a lot more of the content in there. Right now, there's still a lot of holobytes and other mods in the works. So what you see in game right now is a fraction of what the plan is. And you'll see some updates and new content there and all that with every update. But right now, the July update is focused on getting some other major systems in. And once we have those in, we sort of hit a lot of we have sort of all the ingredients in the game at that point to really just focus on pushing holobytes, mods, and build crafting as hard as we can. So what we have right now and where we want to be have a big gap between the two of them. So the game will keep getting better.
Game get better.
Game, get better.
Yeah, we keep telling it to.
Yeah, game.
Seems to keep doing it.
Get your shit together, game.
Next question from Doom. Are the mod changes planned for the July update?
That's a production.
Mod changes. We have we have some updates that we're looking to make to mod for the July update. In addition to the July update having a new crown fight as well.
Whoa.
A duo crown fight.
From Jen. What was the reason behind introducing preferred amps? I think it limits the run variety even more than preferred weapons.
So we want to focus down on each character and their unique differences, and then be able to kind of build from there. As we get more modifiers in the game, as we get more varieties of content in the game, that stuff will start to flesh out and make more sense over time. So we're trying to get our systems correct and then, adjust and tune from there. to get more value out of and explore more depth on each of the individual components. So, like amps having a bit more variety and depth within the amp itself is part of the plan ultimately. So it just takes some time, but we got to set things up correctly before we can dig into that stuff.
Speaking of systems, a question from Kawan. Are you satisfied with the current gameplay loop? The first major update changed a lot, and I believe the feedback from the community was very positive, but do you still think there are areas that need improvement?
Oh, always. I mean, again, the game is in early access for a good reason, so it is not done. It is far from done. So we're gonna continue to improve on all the aspects we can, and yeah, gameplay loop, every piece of that still needs refinement or additions or content or what have you. So yeah, far from done.
You shouldn't expect to see a big loop change at like the fundamental levels like we did in April. We're pretty happy with all that, but future updates are going to layer more systems in there, more features. In the June update, we have added some new things to the map, the Overgrowth, and expect to see more of that, more interesting things to interact with and do and have happen in the open world. Expect to see more layers of gameplay interacting with the rest of the loop. So expect to see that in every major update. Yes, like an onion.
So many layers.
Question from Kyle Katarin. Can you talk a
Hey,
bit about
Star Wars.
design decisions behind things like making holobytes no longer have rarity?
Yeah, I mean, the simple version is as we're digging in throughout all of our different designs and how they work together, we'll make decisions about, what is and isn't working, what is communicating well or not, and what's serving certain purposes. And so it might be multiple layers deep. And in that type of case, it's more like, hey, what is this actually doing what we want it to do? If not, then we can take it out / adjust in other ways. And that's one of those cases where like the rarity stuff wasn't quite doing what we needed it to do. So we have some other ways under the hood that we want to tune for, how these things kind of play out over the course of each run and interlink with one another.
Another question from Kyle. What is your goal for character identity versus loot variety balance? It would seem going too much into making distinct characters with limited loot options can make looting boring, but having open-ended looting can make characters feel all the same. Not an easy job to balance.
It's true. It's not an easy job to balance. I mean, you kind of nailed it right there. It's a balance. It takes time. We're pushing in the right direction and making steps towards that. Smaller steps generally, and we might make some like bigger strides during bigger updates on that front for character differentiation. But it just takes time. It just takes iteration, feedback, etc. So we're sort of progressing towards that a little more slowly. You won't see like dramatic differences on those fronts from update to update, but I think from like now until a version 1.0, the goal is, yes, to make those characters as different as possible without reducing, so the key value of looting and picking up some new things. So it is just that. It's a long tail of balancing to make sure we get those things correct. And so we started out at some point early in the year when we launched that was not where we wanted to be on those fronts in the balance of things, and we're sort of getting to that point, but we still have a path to get there ultimately. But the philosophy is still just take it step by step, don't push too hard in one direction, keep feeling it out, making changes where they feel good and necessary, get feedback from the community, make sure we're not like overstepping on things before we put things out as best as possible, and just keep kind of adding to that formula. So also, as we get new weapons into the game and other mods, again, like the pool of things we can draw from becomes expanded, and that's always been another layer to balancing this type of loop out, where you wish you had every piece of content in there first, and then you could kind of see the array, but sometimes you have to balance between like what you got and where you're gonna be, in X number of months, and so you might see things feel a little more constrained at first, like we're talking about with like amps or whatever else, or even preferred gear, versus months from now as we layer in a few more things, pieces of content, whatever else. Those things will start to feel less constrained and more, well curated for a better overall experience. So it's a balance between like what content that we have in and internal conversations on the design loops. And it just takes time.
Question from Micro Christ. Is there a chance we get a boss rush mode post 1.0?
Never say never. I love a good boss rush mode, but version 1.0 and like what actually is going to be after that is we've got a lot of ideas for like what we'd like to do, but ultimately it'll depend on how well the game ends up doing and how much of an appetite there is for it in the community at large, for what we end up doing, and kind of post-launch support in that way, and just how deep in we can go, whether it's like DLC things or modes or additions. There's a lot we could do and a lot we'd be excited to do, but it ultimately depends on like how well does the game do. Again, that's always been the internal sort of guiding light when it comes to the designs that we lay out. We want to get the essential pieces in there. We want to make sure the core is strong, the foundation is very solid, and if there is further appetite once we sort of complete that version of the game, sure, we could do a lot more things. It's a very flexible overall title and structure in many ways. So a boss rush mode would be super dope, but it depends on, again, like what the appetite of the audience is and how well the sales are doing and everything, and can we support that type of work longer term? We'll have to see once we get to that version 1.0.
And I assume the answer is the same for a horde or endless mode, which is their follow-up.
Yeah, same. I mean, both super fun modes, right? Would love to do more of that stuff, of course, but yeah, same answer. Like, it depends on how well the game does, and can we support, can we sustain that type of development post version 1.0 into like heavier mode switching and stuff. So we'll see. No one can answer that right now.
Great. J Nova 18, first time chat, welcome. Will you let us grind rails and perform jump tricks on the skate park ruin?
I love a Tony Hawk, and we would love to do more with the hoverboard overall. So no promises. I think we've talked about this previously. There's a lot of stuff we, have kind of dreamed about doing with the hoverboard, but we'll see what kind of time we have before version 1.0 to really dig into those systems. But yeah, rail grinding is a blast. I love that stuff. And it is a board, so we'll see.
Question from Starliner. Will there be any plans to increase multiplayer count from 3 to 4 or 5?
Not internally, not right anytime in the foreseeable future. It's difficult to balance that stuff when it comes to multiplayer, when you're doing, whether it's PvP or PvE stuff, but cooperative and scaling enemies and even just netcode stuff can get real wonky the more players you add, and we're not a humongous team, so probably not any plans to do bigger multiplayer groups anytime in the near term, or maybe in the future. If people want to make mods and stuff where you bust open 8 players in a group, like, hey, that's cool, sounds fun. I remember they did that in Risk of Rain 2. There was a bunch of players that started making like 8-player lobbies and stuff. It's like, yeah, the game's not tuned for this, but it's fun, as a side mode if you want to try it out, and it's free to use. But yeah, nothing in our roadmap to dig in on more. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot to balance, and again, we don't have like a giant team to do huge balance shifts for that delta in player scale.
One of our longtime modders just said, I tried to make one for 5 people, not enough people to try. So maybe we'll try it when we get closer to 1.0. That's cool. Another first time chatter, welcome ya old buddy. What inspired the stylistic, I assume the stylistic aesthetic of Hyper Light Breaker? If I could guess, it's is slightly been Risk of Rain 2. What inspired the aesthetic of Hyper Light Breaker?
Not Risk of Rain 2?
Hyperlight Drifter might have?
Yeah, no, Risk.
Yeah.
We've been developing this game for quite some time, and Risk of Rain 2 is great and all, but that was not a reference point for us when it comes to our style or visuals or anything like that. If you look at our games way back from the original Drifter, pretty consistent in our stylistic goals overall. Breaker takes a bit of a turn with a bit more of an anime flavor and like outlines of the characters and things like that. But it's not a big deviation. It's more an evolution of what we did in Solar Ash and what we did in Drifter back in the day. So obviously, good illustration and awesome anime, whatever else, always influence what we do. But we're honestly, when it comes to style goals, not looking at games so much as we're looking at other media, because we're trying as best we can when it comes to our stylization to make it look different from things / not like a traditional video game in a lot of ways. So
Can you talk more about the other inspirations?
Gurren Lagann. Studio Bones does great work when it comes to like their style and animation in general. So look at them if you haven't ever watched any of their stuff.
All right. Next question. Retro Game Show asks, will we get extended dungeons beside the caves? I like the addition, just feels like a Lab 2.0. I would love Hyperlight Drifter styled underground instances.
We do plan to continue to expand on what it means to explore some of those, sectioned off spaces with a bit more depth and what have you. So stay tuned on that front. I think you'll get something in the realm of what you like or what you're asking for. Maybe not exactly like Drifter, but more depth for sure.
Yeah, right now the labs and caves are really there to sort of establish footprint and give us a doorway into those spaces in our procedure generation. Expanding those spaces, making them more interesting, deeper, larger, etc., is all stuff we have on the docket for the future. There's a chance some of that might make it into July, but realistically, I would expect to see a lot more of that this fall.
Question from Ari. Will we have an animal drifter representative for each original region of Hyperlight Drifter? Like how we have Tanu for the raccoon representation of the West.
For playable characters, for the Breakers, no. We kind of have had our character roster for a while, so there's some crossover for sure, but not everyone will show up that showed up as far as like species go.
Question from Davinator. I'm part of a new indie game project and would love to get some words of wisdom from a more experienced team. Have there been some general rules or ethos you've learned to abide by in the very early stages in the game roadmap? Like when you're still workshopping core game mechanics?
Early on in this project, it was important to at least establish, because of its structure and being multiplayer and procedural and everything, that there is a flexible nature to mechanics and systems, so that there's always going to be, I think in any game you make, an amount of that game you just can't make. You're going to want to try and do a lot of different things, and there's probably an abundance of good ideas from plenty of people on the team about like what could happen in this video game that we're going to make, and that's amazing, but in almost every case you're going to have to scale that down. So my recommendation is having some flexibility and scalability built in on the production side, especially in early planning, and focusing down on the core pieces and really iterating on that. It's not always possible. on Breaker. Certainly, this game is like a very systems-heavy game, and it relied on having procedural generation to be true to like build out many other aspects of it. So you can't always build the cart before the horse, so to speak. So if you're doing new games, if you're new to games, I would say the best advice that I could give is start smaller than you think you need to, and find that core mechanic or loop or whatever you want to call it that feels really good, and iterate on that as much as possible before trying to map out the entirety of the game. Have some idea of what you want to do for the whole scope of it, but don't get too married to all your ideas, because you'll probably have to change or cut or do some amount of adjusting to any number of them.
Yeah. I got a couple of tips. The first one would be, and this kind of echoes what Alex is saying, is don't be married to anything. Be willing to kill your darlings. You should have a top level thesis statement or pitch, elevator pitch or whatever for your game. In this case, we are a open world roguelike in the Hyperlight universe. That's the stuff that we're not looking to change. But what those words mean, that's what you're exploring. That's what you're figuring out. So as long as that goal stays the same, you'll get there. The next step is to be aware of impossible problems. You can take that phrase and Google it. There's a really good GDC talk from some dude at Riot who explains what that means. Open world roguelike is an impossible problem. Two concepts that stand at odds with each other that need to be compromised in order to work. We can't make an open world game that gives you 50 hours of play in a single world and also feel like a roguelike, because roguelikes involve refreshing and starting again, right? And we can get deeper into what these words mean and all that in another call. That's not the point here. But the point here is be aware of those, don't invent those for yourself, and make sure that you are solving those. And the next thing I would say is there's nothing faster you can do than iterate on paper. There's nothing you can do on paper that will prove out a design, though. You need to test things. And if it's easier to spend 4 hours and experiment with something than spend 6 hours debating whether or not you should experiment with it, go for the experiment. The last thing I will say is, and this ties into what Alex was saying again, is think about things as components and inputs, outputs that can connect in different ways, like Legos. It feels really elegant to be like, oh, we're going to have this thing that connects everything and it's all looped together. And then what happens is one of those pieces doesn't work or isn't there yet because things take different amounts of time and the whole thing falls apart. Or you start making bad decisions based around the thought that something in the future will come in and make it suddenly good. But that oftentimes doesn't work and it becomes more and more difficult to iterate. When you're an indie, you have the advantage of being a small team who can rapidly shift focus, who can rapidly get on the same page and understand things after a quick conversation. That's your strength, is being able to iterate rapidly and keep people aligned. So lean into that. Don't make things that are too complex and interconnected. Instead, think of them as components that can be plugged into each other and remixed. Kill your darlings, iterate on paper only as long as it's useful, and then start touching it as soon as you can.
Paper prototypes are fun.
Paper prototypes are fun. If you can prototype something on paper, whether it's a loot system or some sort of decision tree or whatever, or a puzzle, go for it. You can prototype any deck builder card game with actual index cards and markers. That's how people have been doing this for 20 years.
Beginning of time.
Long before Slay the Spire. Yeah. The cool thing is in your paper prototype, you can make new cards on the fly and edit those, etc., etc. At the end of the day, nothing matters except the game and the game software, not your design docs, not your cool concept art, not anything else. So the quicker you can get to that, the quicker you can make that feel good, the better. So and have fun. If you're not having fun playing it, not having fun making it, is that going to show through in the end?
Yeah, I would say, it's cool to have ambitious ideas and wild stuff, and don't not pursue that, but also keep in mind, like, the development cycle. It's a long one, oftentimes. So I think the easier you can make it on yourself, the better off you'll be, generally speaking. Yeah, so again, like I was saying earlier, strip things down, keep it as simple as you can, really focus on limited elements, because it's more sustainable that way to develop. It's going to be a trek no matter what game you're making. So try and let yourself have a bit of a break so you can enjoy the parts of the process that you're really good at. And you don't have to struggle as much with the things that you're not so good at or just are boring or tedious, because there's a lot of that in games development no matter what you're making. So try not to punish your future self too much. I say that from experience, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good one. There is a cost to learning and figuring things out, and it's making mistakes. You got to make mistakes. You can't figure out mistakes on paper. Oftentimes, you have to actually feel them out and figure out why they don't work.
Yeah,
If
make
you want to
mistakes is
shortcut
great.
that process, play bad games. The bad games that have made all the mistakes that you could make, you're going to learn a lot more from those than going and playing Mario as your only platformer, and then going, why don't my game feel like Mario? Mario looks simple. It isn't. There's a reason that IP exists and has existed and changed the games industry so much, and it's because platformers that weren't that were not operating on the same level. All the things that we take for granted now, those were things people had to figure out. So
I mean, Commander Keen
go
was
play
not as
bad
good.
games. Commander Keen was very cool for its time. That was built off of id making a Super Mario Brothers 3
know.
PC version, getting actual scrolling
Yeah, they want
screens.
to do
That was big
side-scrolling.
tech. That was
Like, PC games don't do
game
side-scrolling
changing.
well.
Yeah,
And then they did.
and then they figured that out, and then they figured
Like, what
out,
if we
hey,
do
we can
that?
do 2.5D games, and then
Mhm.
they made a whole bunch of genres along the way. Yeah,
Anyway.
we should move on because I could
Yeah, let's
fill
go.
a day with
It's a
just
long
like
subject we could both
info
talk
dumping.
about endlessly, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, maybe
Twitch
that's a
chat-
different
I'll-
talk sometime.
Twitch chat is talking about how NoClip did a documentary series about the development behind the scenes of Hyperlight Breakers, so check that
Yeah.
out for sure. Just go to NoClip's YouTube channel. It's called Hyperlight Development. And for our next question from Lynn, are there any plans to add supportive breakers? Not direct healing breakers, but utility-based builds like Temp Shield, Rail, Blade Enhancement, Amp Buff, etc.
This is kind of again, as we get into more mods and more characters and whatever else, like we'll have more content to support some of these things. Ultimately, the goal for the characters is that they can be independent enough that you can tackle challenges without feeling like you're helpless. And so more utility-based builds can be okay, but right, it's not quite an MMO where you can guarantee you're going to have like a line of tanks going in front of you. So it's a little more in the Destiny realm where y'all kind of have to be at least somewhat self-sufficient. And there's a fine balance there between those things. So it doesn't mean we won't have like other mods or what have you that make you a little more utility-based. So in the future, you can count on some new elements there to some extent, but it's always going to be within the realm of, but yes, you can still shoot and fight and slash and be useful on dealing damage as well.
Question from Deetris. Is there any possibility, in order to keep the interest on play, is there any possibility to be able to keep gear after finishing a cycle? You could choose one per cycle and the next cycle gets more difficult, etc.
We had something like that when we first launched, and turned / removed a lot of that from the game because it was taken away from some of our other aspects and complicating. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be something simpler in the future that could be interesting about what you're talking about, of like some kind of preservation, but at the moment, no real plans to kind of preserve that stuff. We want to keep things as streamlined as possible because we already got a lot going in the game. It's a complex beast, so always about balancing out what the player understands versus like the long-term value of something, and it takes a lot of iteration there.
definitely as we get end game systems in, and we get higher levels of difficulty, and need more ways to change the way the game plays, to keep that end game feeling fresh. There's a lot of opportunity there to explore different things, but that's not going to be something you'd ever see come back into the beginning of the game. It was not useful.
Question from Zenron. What can we expect leading up to the Abyss King fight? Will there be any kind of explorable area, or will it be straight into a fight?
The Abyss below, it has some stuff in it. It's not going to be some big elaborate, multi 15-20 minute level or anything like that, but it's not just walk up and kill the Abyss King either, to like a door and then open and then you're there. I think the main thing is about presentation and visual storytelling, so that's what we want to focus on there.
Okay.
It'll look fancy and be big.
Question also from Hero Zen. Any plans to have characters or races with specific interactions with the Overgrowth? Like having some characters be able to open up shortcuts while others are able to use mounted guns or traps, for example.
Nothing quite like that. That is an interesting idea. When you start to get into those types of systems, you start to have like consideration in your procedural generation for those dependencies. And then you're left with the sort of challenge of, well, what if none of the players are those characters that can take advantage of specific things, So it's always a bit of a double-edged sword when it comes to like super unique one-off or like siloed components that you want to consider the broader context and the overall playability with like the majority of games that are being played in your game. So interesting. Doesn't mean there won't be anything, a little more, well, yeah, I think the short answer is probably not anything that specific, but, whether we have characters, interact with a bit more story or things like that, and more context that you might get otherwise to reveal more about them, there's conversations we've had around that front in the very long term, so.
From Morpheus666. Do
Oh
you
no,
intend
Morpheus, don't
for
go to hell.
affix re-rolling to be a core part of gameplay, or is that a placeholder until other systems are fleshed out?
Yeah, we plan to have some affix, re-rolling and gear upgrade stuff continue to be part of like how you play the game. So we'll see when we get certain updates in. Again, a lot of this stuff when it comes to gear and what you're getting throughout a run just takes time to balance, to consider, because we have to play it a lot internally to make sure over the course of multiple hours and multiple runs and a variety of different builds, there's many different combinations of things that they all make sense and that they scale the correct way. So, but yes, we do want to do more with like being able to have a little bit more granular control on certain fronts, potentially even on affixes. So.
From Trix. I was wondering if there's a way to implement a VR training area within the hub or social space for players to experiment and try out amps, blades, and rails, something similar to the training area for basic combat within the tutorial.
Yeah, definitely. That's part of our roadmap before version 1. We plan to flesh out that like training / free play space in the hub eventually before we do our launch, our V1.
Mm-hmm.
From Miku, can you spoil or demystify one of the new systems or onion layers that you plan on adding to the current content? Asking for spoilers.
I mean, didn't we reveal some stuff in the roadmap?
Yeah, we mentioned there's a difficulty system. And yeah, that difficulty system is similar to a lot of other roguelikes. I'm playing a lot of Monster Train 2 right now, so like in their Covenant levels, or I forget what Risk of Rain calls theirs, Eclipse, or like Slay the Spire has Ascension, Hades has their Heat.
Halo
these sorts
has
of things where it's like it's like this escalating challenge where if you beat it on one difficulty, you can kick it up more and make it harder, and so you can ultimately sort of scale the game to your ability. That's what the difficulty system is going to be, and when we get that in July, that'll be just a fraction of sort of how deep that's going to go. But we'll be establishing that, and you'll be able to see how that works and how that builds an endgame for us.
Spox asks, are the artworks in Memories definitive? Meaning, are they a work in progress, or are those the final versions of each drawing?
Depends on which one. Some you'll see are more finished than others, so the ones that look more finished are actually finished, and some are still sketchy. So.
Yeah, I think for the most part, the ones that are in the game right now are final or close to final. There's probably some exceptions in there, and there's a lot of half-finished stuff that's probably living in the files but not available right now. Expect to see more narrative showing up again in future updates. We had to pause that for a bit, and we didn't have narrative for Maw come out with Maw, but that is picking up and speeding up, and you'll see some stuff soon, and you'll start to see more of that trickle in future updates as well.
Question from Jen. Will we ever get a list of what weapons the breakers can use during runs in the character selection screen?
Yes. Yeah,
Like,
we want to add the preferred weapon stuff is only available in the patch notes, and we want to put that front and center, so that people have an understanding of what that is.
Yeah, that's one of those things where we'll be selective about our information, and make sure players understand what's going on. Generally speaking, we don't want to hide a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Question from Miku again. Any plans for integrated mod support or releasing an SDK or API?
Not at the moment. Doesn't mean in the future we wouldn't, but for now, we're just trying to finish our game. So
yeah,
once we get past version 1, I think there's definitely a new renewed conversation to have on that front.
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, we are an Unreal Engine game, and so there's a decent amount of stuff that people can do just because we're Unreal, and so I know there are a handful of community mods. I know one of the people asking questions in here has a pretty cool difficulty mod already, if you're someone who has mastered this game and are waiting for July. So there's definitely people modding, and we like to see it, so keep it up. We're not in a place where we can provide official support yet until we get the game done, but modding is awesome, and we support it.
MK Otade asks, are there plans to replace flat percentage increase holobytes as bonuses with either situational activations or altogether something completely different?
We'll see. It's a case-by-case basis. Again, we're gonna keep looking at each of our holobytes and what buffs what, and there's a lot of interdependencies there, right? When you're talking about these types of systems, you kind of have a cascade of different vectors coming into one point to make a build, and so what affects what and how it scales. There's a lot of math that goes under the hood, and so sometimes it's useful to just have flat scaling. Sometimes it's more useful to have something that some other formula to sort of increase power in some way or another. So it'll just be a case by case basis. But no, there's no hard plan to be erase all these or anything like that.
Abigail, why do you try to balance new or bad players in the same group as veterans? Surely a difficulty setting like Hyper Light Drifter had would be an improvement for both sides of the scale, right?
Yes,
it's not
that's why we're adding a difficulty
Yeah,
system.
it's not one size fits all. Yeah, we just talked about the difficulty stuff, so see it when you get it, and you'll be able to kind of tune things accordingly.
Vegas666, have you considered unifying holobytes affixes and status effects into one category, which we could add to gear slots? Wouldn't that make build crafting deeper and more flexible?
The short answer is we've definitely talked about many different iterations of how all these mods fit together. That suggestion, without going too deep, it's hard to describe certain things. Just to say, like, yeah, we've talked a lot about how to sort of distribute the modifications you get for your build across all the different aspects that we have within mods. You know, mods being like the overall grouping of modifiers, meaning, yeah, status effects and holobytes and affixes and whatever else. So our distribution is far from like finished on some fronts, but pooling it all together and doing different slots like is not really the jam. We've tried some variations of that way back when in some fashion or another. You know, we want to create interesting generated loot that players have and kind of work from there. So
From Andrew345, a more in-game question. Is it planned to expand the hub more and more? And will we be able to play soccer against friends on the hub, or will we get another soccer kid?
Eternal Demon Soccer Kid. We definitely want to do more with the hub when it comes to like what you can interact with there. And so in that sense, yeah, we want to make sure we get the rest of the NPCs in and whatever shop things we're missing and other meta progression elements. Would love to, you know, fill out that field with some fun minigame stuff. Whether or not, like, how deep the multiplayer will go with that remains to be seen. You know, we do have other priorities right now with core systems that we're getting to. So if anything comes of, you know, less central hub stuff, it'll be much later down the line than right now. So, you know, we might have some updates on that, like closer to the end of the year on any fun hub stuff that isn't essential to the core gameplay, you know, like soccer.
From Spox, is the dog from Drifter going to be back? Maybe even as an Easter egg?
We'll see. We'll see. May already be back. You don't know. We don't know.
From Jen, will the extraction element get more stuff related to it?
Our focus is really on the open world and the roguelike-y things and the run to run and how that's building up. You know, the extraction stuff definitely has aspects to it that we're shoring up when it comes to like what you're getting in the hub and upgrading and, you know, refills and stuff like that and buffs. So stay tuned for the July update. I think you'll see a little bit more on that front and like the balance of value of going back to the hub during a run versus staying in the run. I think will become more apparent as we continue to drill down on this stuff.
Since
Yep.
you mentioned
Yeah, that's definitely
focus-
something we're aware of. It's lightweight and we want to improve.
Yeah. But just to be clear, we're also not trying to make it an extraction game or anything like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned the open world being a focus. Are there going to be new open world events or world events? Because I feel like the open world is kind of empty outside the usual patrols, enemy drops, and assassins.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely have more content on the way, planned out for future
Yeah.
updates. So stay tuned.
Yeah. In June, we just added these map revealers as like really the first sort of non-core gameplay element in the world. You can expect to see more of this kind of stuff coming in July, and you can expect to see world events and even more things to sort of deepen the world and add more stuff to it that you can do as we get closer to 1.0.
Question from Birdshot. Since amps are personal now, can you give Goro a sniper amp like he had in some initial art and old Psycon named Sniper?
You know, we have some other things on docket for things like longer range play styles. So whether it comes in the form of an amp or not, you know, we have some stuff in the works for other modifiers and etc. So we'll see in the future. But yeah, amps are, I think, relatively locked in at this point of like which ones we're going to have in the game. Generally speaking, they need some polish and iteration. But yeah, I think you'll get sort of the thing you're looking for with farther ranged combat and other forms.
Here's a question that Jen has raised, but that's also been floating around a bit. What is going on with the cycle reset thing that happens when you need to join someone's run? Is that being reworked or fixed in some way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something we want to remove eventually, so that you can have more seamless drop in, drop out. But with the changes and with the changes that we've made, and with the network requirements for the game, that's a lot more work than it may initially appear, to be able to synchronize a gameplay session that you weren't always there for, and be able to handle saving that, and what happens if you join halfway through and complete it, or never finish one with your friend, and suddenly you have 36 different half-finished games that we're saving, that will never be completed because you played them with random people halfway through. There's a lot of stuff we have to do to be able to resolve all of those issues, and it's not. None of it is like impossible, but it is a large quantity of work that would otherwise come at the cost of new features. And right now we're trying to get the rest of our sort of feature layers in there as quickly as we can, so that we can solve those issues without having to resolve those issues when new features come online. So it's an order of operations thing. It will return. You will be able to join and save progress in multiplayer a lot better than you can right now. But don't expect that for July. Expect that for post-July, close to version 1.0.
Cool. From Riley Ant. Are we any closer to getting a bow rail?
Any closer? I mean, we're getting to version 1 sooner than later, so in that sense.
Yeah. We're not getting farther away from it.
And their second question is, thoughts on a blink or teleportation amp, like to quickly get behind an enemy?
Blinks and teleportations are always interesting. I think they're very basic in a lot of games, and you got to be careful of what you do there in a lot of instances, because you can end up in collision or breaking an enemy or what have you. So I think there's a reason why a lot of games end up avoiding it, but the ones that do are pretty basic. So we'll see, whether we do something more like that with modifiers down the line, but nothing at the moment to dig into other than it's a fun mechanic if you can make it work well. And in a network scenario, that can be harder, so.
Gav22122. I heard something about boss changes. What are those like? I guess if you could just go into any changes that might be coming up on the existing bosses.
For July, we've been taking a look at Maw, and there's some improvements that we want to make with regards to the pacing of that fight, and some of the behaviors that she has, and how she's able to attack, and how she's exposed or not exposed to the player. We're taking a look at Dro as well, but I would not expect to see any big changes there to Dro or Exis, although we'd like to. Wouldn't expect to see those for July. Maw is sort of the one we're looking at right now. Our first priority for July is getting the new crown in there. Once we have the many months of work it takes to actually get a boss in the game, then it's a lot easier to tune and balance and improve. But it takes a long time to get there.
Question from Polaire. It's a lore question. Does the Drifter know of PB's existence in the world of Hyperlight?
No. That's the
Nice
short answer.
Right. Question from I'm a Hippo, first time in Twitch chat, but I know you from Discord. Will there be more biomes other than the 3 or 4 that are already in the game?
Right now, we've got our palette, so to speak, that we've been working with for some time. We have plenty of ideas of like what else we could do in the future, and this goes back to an earlier answer from the start of this, which is would love to do more things post version 1.0, but depends on how the game sells, what the appetite is for. There's a lot of cool stuff we could do in the future for new biomes and cool stuff like that, because again, the format of the game is flexible enough to sustain many different types of things, including biome differences. So not for the foreseeable future, but post 1.0, a lot of things are possible, and it really just depends on how does the game do. Do we have the time and money do we have the money to be able to build that stuff again? Is the audience hungry to keep on going with further development for it? So.
Question from Spox. At the moment, we can sometimes see some floating islands in the distance. Are they accessible right now, or are they going to have a use in the future?
Yes. They will definitely have some use in the future.
I assume we're talking about that thing up there in the sky.
I assume
Yes.
so.
Yeah, we'll have some stuff in there. The goal for the game has always been show all the things you can go do as much as possible. We don't want to just have things there for the sake of being there and looking compelling but inaccessible. So that was one of the inspirations here from open worlds when we're talking about like what does it mean to be an open world in this context and sort of the conflicts there, but still saying like open world can really mean like accessible to pretty much every part, and so same idea here. So yeah, we want you to go up there eventually.
Awesome. And with that, I think we are at the end of our questions. So any words about what's coming up? The team, I assume, will be heads down working until the July update.
I'll let Michael speak to that.
I see here. I think I've shared some extra details from what was in our roadmap already. This is going to be a major update. I expect it to be expected to have as much new sort of features and content as the April update did, except it's all new stuff. It's not reworking old stuff very much. So I think we said, difficulty system, we talked about quests, which will just be a fraction of what those are intended to be long term. We've got a new rail. I don't know if we've talked about that. That'll be the first new rail. That's pretty fun right now. I don't know. Keep your eyes peeled. We will tease more stuff as we get closer to the July update. And because it's bigger, I could probably say you should expect that towards the end of July and not the beginning of July, similar to how the April update was at the end of April.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for everyone joining up and asking questions.
Got some good insight
thank
out
you all.
of this. And thanks, as always, for everyone who came in and asked questions, took notes, etc. Everyone's excited. Much love. Looking forward to what's to come. This is cool. All right.
We'll see you all next time.
Yeah. Catch you later, folks.
Bye.
Bye.